Hi, I'm Michelle Olivier, and you're listening to Hey, I Want Your Job, the podcast that looks at amazing jobs and what it takes to get them.
Welcome to a very special week of Hey, I Want Your Job. And this week is extra special because I get to interview one of my favorite people that I actually get to work with on the regular, Athena. Job title.
Oh wait, did you ask me? Sorry.
Oh, what's your job title?
What is my job title? Oh, okay. My job title is actually Chief Creative Unicorn.
Which is a ridiculously fabulous job title. I think we can all agree.
Yeah.
I love it. So Chief Creative Unicorn in other companies that were less colorful, that would be Chief Creative Officer. It sounds bougie as fuck, I'm not gonna lie.
It does.
Super important, and like you are in charge of all of the paintbrushes.
Yeah.
But what do you actually do?
So as a Chief Creative Officer, specifically within Rainbow Unicorn, my job title and my role is really about focusing in on the what of what we built. So we are a video game studio, and so as the Chief Creative, so if you think about it as various people are the who, what, why, when, and where, right? Mine is the what. So what games are we building? What market, what's going to excite our market? What's going to get them to show up for every game that we build? Pulling the teams together to create those things, making sure that those the subject matter, that the projects that we're putting together are to the quality, and also like creating the portfolio that we want our studio to be building, right? So we're thinking about that balance of like, what do we want to put out in the world for people to play and experience? And so my job is basically to be heading up and leading that, right? To make sure that we're all aligned on that.
So I always think that, like, just the things that people call themselves in gaming, like it always has this like 1950s like classic Hollywood sort of vibe, like you're the head studio or like and I think that it's actually a little bit like opaque to people who are new. Like it was when I hear Chief Creative Officer, if I hadn't been in gaming forever, and like I would assume genuinely that you were an artist and a creative, and like I would think that those people fed to you, but I would think that the engineering would go somewhere else. And so I always think that it's kind of, I understand why it's called that, but I also think it's a little bit of a misnomer from that regard. And
it is a little bit, yeah. I think that's a main problem in the games industry. We're not really standardized the way some various industries are, and somewhat because we're new and we're still like, it's constantly changing. I think for us, we settled on, for a little while, we were calling me Chief Product Officer. And we went to creative just because I liked like tapping into that aspect of it. Because I am a designer, but I haven't, and I haven't been able to really, in my career, dive deep into the design aspects of what in my career in general. And so for me, it is a little bit of a, it's a reminder to myself that this is it's innovative and it's imaginative role, and it is kind of my it's a reminder to me every day that it isn't just about making decisions based on what's going to pull the money in, but what's going to be the creative, right? What's going to be the spark that goes out into the world that we're going to be happy about. And right now, as we're still very new, I am the actual creative director on our first game. So, that's the creative aspect. A lot of the structure of the design that's happening right now is what is me. So I've got a couple of narrative designers that work with me right now, but otherwise it's me. So that is right now I'm being very creative, actually. So yeah.
So let's start with the fact that you've been doing this for a long time and kind of how we got here, because I think one thing that would be real that will not in games that it would be helpful to understand is why do all video games wind up looking basically alike? Like we could all think of the outliers, right? Like, oh, you say all video games, but they're, and exactly. So those are the exceptions that prove the rule. But otherwise, if you have basic genres, right? You have your first-person shooters, you have your RPGs, you have your, platform games, but there's like 4 or 5 basic genres. That's it. Hasn't been a lot of movement on those basic genres. And yes, I know that Rainbow Unicorn is trying to change that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But like, talk to us about how we got to this place where every title is just a different, like, same shit, different day kind of iteration.
I think it's similar to the same thing that you'll see in any creative industry, right? It's a matter of the people who have the money will only want to back things that are guaranteed to win. And the only way you can promise a thing is going to win is if you can show data from something else that has won already and say, oh, well, here's a thing that made money. So so create that thing, because we just assume, right, that if the one before it made money, then a copy of it will also make money, right? And so it's a matter of being able to reduce risk, right? When it comes to people who are making all the money decisions, they don't want to take a huge risk. So that's why most of your blockbuster movies are all very similar premise, right? This is why, the same story, the same novel gets rewritten over and over and over again, right? Or those like really famous authors that have best-selling novels all the time. You're like, oh my God, are they really just putting some new names on their characters and re-releasing the same exact book? Right?
Different iterations of the same freaking thing can we have?
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same thing, right? And so we run into that same issue in the games industry as with any other creative industry, which is that it's very hard to sell innovation in a creative space, because if you can't, right, like people don't want to take a risk without being able to show that this is the thing that made money before, and so people make copies because they know that will be income, but it's not exciting.
So let's use that then to talk about Rainbow Unicorn, because the company that you and the rest of the coven, what we call the founders at Rainbow Unicorn Games, you guys basically said call bullshit on all of that. And I don't want to tell your origin story for you, even though obviously I'm familiar. But so tell us a little bit about like how that decision made and like what makes Rainbow Unicorn different, and then what challenge that brings.
Yeah, so for us, a lot of what we're looking to build and the way that we want to break that mold is, for one, showing the data not necessarily based on what's been built before, but showing data based on the audience that is waiting for something new to be created. So there's, right, a lot of research that's been coming out. There's this one like particular data point that we really love pulling out, and that it is that 47% of gamers are saying that they choose not to play games because they don't see themselves in it or their own story being told. And that particular number hit me really hard, because it was like, that tells us that the industry is leaving 40% of a potential market just ignoring completely, right? And so that's such a huge possibility space, right? That tells us that there is money to be made there. Someone just needs to start like diving into that space, and not with the same rehashed gameplay mechanics that we've seen over and over and over again, because apparently those are not serving, right? This market is saying that's not what I want. right? I'm not being served yet. So so they're specifically calling out for something new. And so the way we want to address this space is to not fully just go like way off and just create there's some amazing, really crazy indie developed games that can happen out there, but we're talking about building a studio that has AAA quality. So we need to be able to like put some kind of research and hopes towards monetization behind it, right? So a lot of what we're looking at doing is actually taking some of these tried and true mechanics that you see in really, beloved games like your BioWare games that give you these like narrative choice options. They're really deep and wonderful storytelling, but combining that into your phone so that it's accessible to, a primarily, women market who isn't in the console or PC space. When they're playing games, they're playing on a thing that they can pull out in their pocket in 5 or 15 minutes, right? Little snippets of gameplay. So we want to combine this more accessible space with a more complex and deep gameplay experience that isn't focused on combat, because there's so much combat, right? I can download a billion games right now. There are games around combat, but there's other things, right, that we can make systems and create entertainment off of.
What I will say is that when I first heard and saw the pitch for Rainbow Unicorn Game,
yeah,
I was jazzed about all the titles, but I was also a little sad because like part of what you said was, people don't see themselves in the games that they want to play.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And so to me, like, I kind of want to play a game where somebody goes and punches people in the nose, but I would really like them to some way represent me. And so like having games that do like, yes, you're right, there's 1,000 beat 'em up games that we could download, but none of them look like me, right?
Yeah.
Nobody in there looks like the queer native chick with way too many curves, right? Like, and so like I was jazzed hearing the pitch, thinking that that was the direction. And then, don't get me wrong, very excited about the titles that are there. But talk to me a little bit about why, because it was a different direction you could have gone. And that's pretty like definitively like, nope, that's not who we are. Like 5 years from now, when we're on like title D, rock on. Let's have some pretty American ass kicking. But today, that's not it. What was it? Was it just like a total like, there's too much violence in the world, let's do something different? Was it just like your personal passion? Like, how did that break get made?
I think that's part of it, right? For me, when there's too much violence in the world, right? And also it's a space that, even though there aren't a lot of fighty games where we can see people like us in those fighty games, we are seeing some movement towards that. It's slow, it's like not as fast as we would like to see it, but there is some movement in there. And there's a lot of like that feels like a mechanic, and it's also a thing that I've worked in for years, right? Like I've built so many games that were based around like combat mechanics and everything, that it also feels like it's done, and there's a lot of people who have that space covered, that I want to make sure that when we jump out there, we jump out with something completely fresh and new, and that is also bringing in a corner of our audience that, right, one of the things when we say that there's all this audience that isn't being served, right, some of that might be that they want some kind of a game experience that isn't centered around violence, right? And so that's something I really wanted. I felt like we could reach out to the broadest funnel of our potential audience by saying, okay, you know what? Do you want something without combat, but something you can see yourself in, something that's still going to be interesting and intriguing and depth of game, but isn't going to be stressful in your life, right? And that's so that was part of it, right? And then at some point, yeah, I definitely want to see us like go out there. I want to see all types of different games, right? But I think that the first step was, let's really step away completely from what's been the standard.
And I totally, like, as a lifelong gamer, totally get and feel and like embrace that, right? Like, my husband always gives me a hard time. I love gaming, but I am so fucking picky about what I will play. And like the rules of my gaming are like lengthy and detailed. And I think he literally has like a spreadsheet somewhere because I won't do platform games. I won't do first person shooters. I won't do any game in which I kill other humans. That's not okay. Like, and so like for years, my favorite game was Fable.
Ah,
Was always like, why? Like, what is it? I was like, baby, this is an entire game about predicated on interior decorating, fashion choices, bullshitting, and whoring. I am all in.
yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, like, if I have sex without a condom and Fable, I can get a disease and I gotta take a potion. Yeah, I can. Or I can get knocked up and have babies and all the different consonants. Yeah, I can. Like, to me, and he was always just like, you have very weird gameplay. But I think that that's kind of your point, right? That like, I'm not alone. I know lots of other people that are like, freaking genius way of thinking about that game. Now I do want to play. I want to like use my dog to find random condoms on the ground and Fable. But like that kind of sense of humor and that is problematic as Peter Molyneux is. Like he made great games, right? And so, or make great games. I don't know what he is now. But like, I think that that's kind of the ethos that you guys are capturing a rainbow unicorn. And that's what's so exciting is it's all of those moments that the people who don't have seats at the table had like, wouldn't it be great if this game was only this? Like I didn't have to run around and like blast people. Like I could just decorate these houses and then like do a little whoring on the side and that would be great. And so like I totally hear it and I'm super excited about all of those things, totally. So let's talk about your street cred and how you get to be the chief creative officer for Rainbow Unicorn Games. Because it wasn't like we were like, who do we know that likes games and has lady parts? Athena. Like it wasn't like that. You've done it. So tell me a little bit about like your rising up through the ranks and like where you started and how you got it.
Yeah, so I always love telling when people ask me where I came from. So I came from theater, which is always a fun thing to tell people in tech. And so yeah, so that was my degree is in directing theater. So what's funny about this is I was a theater kid at the same time I became a gamer kid. So at the same time, when I was about 6, I started playing games, but I also had a speech impediment. So one of the ways to get me out of that and to get me from being extremely shy, which clearly I was cured of, was to put me in theater. So in case anybody has a very shy child, just put them in theater. It will solve everything. So both of these things are things that I grew up with, was storytelling, both on the stage and in video games. And so when I had to go off to college, I had to make a choice. And I decided I still wanted to try to be an actress. And then it became my fascination with directing instead, the actual like storytelling and pulling all the bits together. But I was really frustrated with how not innovative the professional theater scene was, right? So much like you were talking about how in games we're seeing the same thing rehashed, it's in an industry as old as the theater is, it's even worse, right? Like it's the same rehashed shows over and over and over again and the same formula, and if it doesn't meet that formula, it's not going to hit Broadway, and you can only make money if you're on Broadway. And that just felt really tired to me. I wanted something else. I wanted to be able to like actually reach out my audience, have them feel what it's like to make decisions about things. And so where I was getting to do that was in games, and specifically MMOs started about that same time. I was very heavy into EverQuest. And so I decided I needed to make this. And so I started following all the game companies in my area.
like, a new gamer ever would just be like, of course she was having an EverQuest. Of course she forgot.
Yeah. I was just like, I was such an EverQuest nerd. I was living in Austin, Texas at the time. And so I found out that Shadowbane was being made there. And they were looking for actors, oddly enough. So my first job in the games industry was as an actor. And I would run people through live in-person quests. So I was selling computers at Dell during the day, and at night I would log in or go down to the studio and log in and run around as one of the various characters in the lore, picking up players in a town and being like, come with me, I have a quest to run on. And then we would run off and we would just improv our way through a quest, a few nights a week. And that's where I got my start. And from there, I dug into a lot of really great supporters there at Wolfpack, who really just started teaching me all there was about games. So I dug into, community stuff, QA stuff, started learning about design. And then I went to work for NCSoft in QA. I worked there for about 4 years. I launched City of Heroes and Lineage 2 on the same day. That was quite a day.
It's so big. It's 2 major titles.
Yeah, no big deal. I did that. And then I was QA lead over on Guild Wars for its launch and a couple other of its expansions. And then after a little while of doing QA work, I decided to go back. I had like 1 year left of my degree. So a lot of the folks that worked with me at Wolfpack Studios had started another startup for an MMO, and they invited me to come be a designer with them while I finished my degree. So I went over there and I actually got to be a world designer for about 1.5 years, which was really great with a startup studio. So we were like building the world from scratch. It was super exciting. I got to play in the engine. I went everything from like quest building to putting together monsters to, writing pages and pages of lore and all of this stuff. But in the midst of that, I kept finding myself distracted by the communication problems between the team. And so when that studio shut down, I felt a really big draw to go into production because I wanted, there were so many people who have amazing talent to design. And I felt like there weren't that many people with a great people management talent. And I felt like that was something I could contribute that there wasn't a lot of. So I ended up going and being a live producer to launch the beta of All Points Bulletin in Scotland with Real Time Worlds. And then after a couple of years of that, I ended up on the East Coast where I got recruited by Turbine / Warner Brothers Games, and then worked at Warner Brothers Games as a producer and then an executive producer of Dungeons and Dragons Online and then Lord of the Rings Online. And then I launched our first mobile game there. So I got pulled onto Batman Arkham Underworld about 6 weeks before its launch, and I helped us get our first mobile game out in the world. And then I was there to support the launch of Game of Thrones Conquest for them. And so I was doing all of that as executive producer. And in the games industry, specifically in Warner Brothers, once again, titles are different depending on what studio you're at. Particularly what it meant for me to be an executive producer on those titles was that I was in charge of the entire P&L and the entire team and the roadmap for each of those products. So I was determining what we were building for Dungeons and Dragons Online and Lord of the Rings Online. And I was managing the entire team, and I was in charge of making sure that they were profitable and working right as a business.
So on that note, most of gaming history takes place on a PC or a console. And mobile gaming is still kind of like the newer kid on the block. I mean, none of it's an old block, right?
Yeah.
Children both tell us we are not old, Athena.
Yeah. Very young.
Totally, at heart. But it has been really interesting to watch as mobile gaming takes off, that like there have been some epic fails in the mobile gaming, that like huge titles that launched and just like from every major studio, right? Everybody has had some super, super high profile, just like massive flops. Why? What do you think it is that like, why is like the uptake for those things on a console or a PC there, and then when they try to translate them to a mobile, everybody just goes, nah. What do you think it is that they're getting wrong here?
So there's a couple of things here, right? So one is the gameplay experience, right? There's a big difference between the gameplay, both the attention as well as the way you control the game mechanics on your phone, right? This little tiny glass square that I hold in my hands versus something that's on a giant TV or even in my screen. Like even there's a huge difference for me between PC gaming with my keyboard and playing with my Xbox controller on my TV, right? And just the way things feel or like the complexity you have. But there's also the matter of the time limits, right? So when we're designing for a PC or a console, we can design for somebody sitting for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours at a time, right? For their sessions. But I think that those companies that were building towards PC and console with that in mind, having to switch those gameplay mechanics over to a phone where people might only have like 5 to 15 minutes to dedicate in a session, that was a huge change for how to even design the experience in the first place. You now have to be in these little bits of time. There's also the like, it's becoming less of a problem now as phones become their own little mini computers. But right at the beginning part, it was also a matter of like, how do you take these like big, gorgeous art, we can push art, boundaries all over the place on your PC and your console. When phones were, mobile gaming first started, you couldn't do that so much on the phone. And so it was a matter of how do you still get that fidelity? I think the other problem is that a lot of these companies that were building towards PC and console, when they decided to switch to mobile, they had not been free to play games to start with. So one of the things that, I always like to say benefits me, and while I've only done mobile games for a few years, I've been in free to play games for over a decade because a lot of the MMOs I worked for switched to free to play. Right. So they were PC games, but we moved from a subscription model in the midst of my career into how do you get players to come in for free and then pay for the experience in little bits and pieces. And you have to be thinking about your monetization when you're free to play from the very basis of your design, because if it becomes a thing you just slap on top, it doesn't blend well, and the players can tell. And what it comes across as is just like either a money grab or, right, like it doesn't feel holistic to the experience. And so I think that was also some of the failures you saw, where people who were trying to design for a PC game based on a single purchase, just throwing some free to play stuff on top, and it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, I think that some of the big gaming studios just really don't quite know how to work on a freemium model.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm a big Diablo fan. Like, before finally comes out, I will be taking off a week to just sit on my ass and play Diablo for a week because it's very important to me.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. But like we joked for years that like they have the same like 10, 12 phrases that the characters say over and over, like when they walk in. And whereas, super easy content would be premium content for download would be to have adult version that's like, fuck you. And that's just like those types of things that, again, if you had figured that out at the beginning, right? Yep. When you did it and when you're recording all the dialogues, etc., that would be super easy to have like multiple packs of that over time that you could download. You could have ones that were seasonal. You had like all kinds of things. But nobody like that kind of low hanging fruit. I think is just a very different way of thinking about the game in terms of what is going to be like a micro purchase, but that's going to be a fun enough micro purchase that you're going to be willing to do it. And I think, you know, from a mobile gaming perspective, we've all had that experience where we're playing some game. And like, I always tell my husband, like, there's this game that I played. This stupid game is a pointless game. It's one of those like time waste games. But when I'm just trying to ignore my children, turn off my brain at the end of the day, I do not quit.
Yeah.
And they are very smart about like, they let me play for like 10 minutes. And if I want to do anything else, I have to spend a little bit of money. But it's like $5. And so I think to myself, is it worth $5 to me right now to not have to stop playing this game and therefore not have to go engage with my children? Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. $5 is yours, my friend. And I carry on playing. And so I think that you're right. Like, it's just a very, very, very different fundamental approach to like how you think about earning the money and how you think about the spend process within a game. So, for Rainbow Unicorn Games, Chief Creative Officer, will all of your games be free to play? Will they be a freemium? Will they have subscription models? Like, will there be an option for, are you going to do ads and then you pay a one-time fee and the ads go away? Like, what's the plan, Lady Batman?
Yeah, so the design right now that we're focusing on is very like free to play, you know, games as a service standard, right? So we want to be able to put it out there and free because we want as many people to try it out as possible, right? Like, come in, have fun, enjoy the game, get some time in there, see if this is a thing you like and that you want to support. We'll probably do ads as like little incentives, but not like just you have to get through this ad to do a thing, because ads are actually great revenue models for games. I've had games that we just stopped development on and literally just supported itself through ads, right? Because they work, right, for that purpose. So they're a great revenue model. And what you can do is just like, if you don't have to watch an ad. You can just get some freebies if you want to watch an ad and you know that you're supporting the company without you actually having to shell some money out. But then, you know, we'd have other like, you know, additional things like, but I think a lot of what we want to focus on is being able to create items. And this was something that we learned. I learned a lot in Lord of the Rings online, was how much people love to support your game with just cosmetic purchases, right? If they really love a thing, they want to support you. They want to pay to keep the game going and to make it successful, because it means that you'll create more stuff for them. And so if you can create just fun and interesting things, and I remember actually the first time World of Warcraft decided to sell a cosmetic mount, I was working at another MMO company at the time, and we heard they were going to do it and they were going to sell it for $60. And we were like, they're insane. Nobody will do that. Nobody will pay $60 for a cosmetic flying unicorn or whatever. It doesn't even add anything.
I was so annoyed that I missed it. I was a beta tester on WoW because I'm not old, Athena, but I have been around for a while. And so I got to be a beta tester on WoW. I think my ex-husband was an alpha tester, and then I was in on the beta, and then we played WoW a lot at the beginning. Again, gorgeous game. And I know that Blizzard looked at like how to shift it. That's one of the ones that they tried to shift to mobile, and just there was not like the complexity of it, not a way. But yes, like they definitely proved that model. They proved the monthly subscription model, right? They proved all kinds of models that everybody was like, that will never be a thing.
Yeah, like we didn't do that, right? And so, but they were right, right? And it was brilliant. So, you know, it's things like that we want to look into, like how do we utilize some of the great lessons we've learned in free to play about how to support our product while supporting our player, right? While giving our players things to be excited about and that they want. So we are looking into monetization systems that are, you know, positive versus negative in the way they're additive right? They're giving you a new awesome, you know, item that you can own and love and collect, and it's special, but it's not a like have to have, right? We don't want to put a ton of like gates. Like there'll be some amount of gating to content based on time played and that kind of thing, because yeah, we have to pay our bills at some point. There has to be like some cutoff. You can't get it all for free, right? But maybe you get it all for free if you wait, right? So if it's a time versus money thing. And then the other things that we really want to dive into is being able to let some players support other players, right? So gifting systems. That's another really great thing about, you know, one of these things about free-to-play games that people like to actually criticize, those of us who make them for, is our focus on whales. Which, in case you don't know it, a whale is basically somebody who comes in and just pays a whole lot. I mean, these people are in the like thousands of dollars a month in your game, right? Kind of area. And you want whales. Whales are what actually support most free-to-play models. But often that can create a very negative experience between whales and people who just play the game for free or for low bits of amount of money, because oftentimes spend in a game actually gives more power. But one of the ways that you can actually utilize that monetization of whales to the positive of the community is actually giving them the ability to give things that they buy to other players, because they want people who play with. Right? They want people to experience this game with. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun if they were playing by themselves, right? They'd go play a single player game. They want to be playing it with other people. So there's lots of like things that we would look into that make sure that we're supporting that even in the monetization of our game, we are supporting a giving community, right? A community that can support players supporting players and not just us.
Like, I think that the idea, like a player supporting community, is fantastic. But I know that there are antisocial players out there.
Oh yeah.
Who would just like to be left alone.
Yeah.
To just play by themselves. So that's why I stopped playing WoW, is because there's not a pause button that I can be like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom, pause, get up, go, come back. Like, that's not a thing. You spent 30 minutes waiting on that creature to spawn, you went to the bathroom, somebody came in and yanked it, and now you've got to wait another 30 minutes. Like, wow. And I was just like, oh, I can't with this. That's why I love Diablo. Pause button. All the pause buttons.
So, I'm gonna we should just give that secret out to the entire games industry right now. If you want the parent market,
pause button.
Pause button. That's all you need. Just a pause button. That's it. I just gave you guys the free advice to go make your millions. Put a pause button.
Because it's impossible as a parent, right? Like, there's so many fun games out there that I have really enjoyed over the years that I could not continue to play as a responsible adult. It was just not a thing. And so the ability to like log in, play for a fixed amount of time, pause button, and leave. And I know that like that's a lesson that Nintendo learned, right? With the Animal Crossing, with the old iteration, no pause button. You were gone for too long. They grouched at you. It was weird and a thing. New iteration. Oh, it's okay. You're not here. It's fun. There is on. So, and I think it's really, I think it's a hard like balance to get. To talk to me about like, as a new gaming studio, you don't have like buckets of user data and all of like the, you know, access to big data info, etc., that we anticipate that the evil tech sector has about us. You're just going off of gut and community. So how do you make sure, as you're getting ready to launch this first title, that we get right? Like, what does that look like?
User testing. That is like the main thing. And actually I was thinking when you were saying like, why were there these giant flops when other large companies would try to switch to mobile? And that this is another example of that, right? And that is the one of the gifts that mobile gives to us. Although you could do this on PC and everything too. It's just people aren't as used to it. in a like, I paid my money up front, I expect an entire game. What's wonderful about a free-to-play mobile, or, you know, free-to-play monetization style is that when you're free and you say, here's a part of a game, people will come in and play it and experience it and tell you what they liked about that little part. And then they'll say, I did like that, I didn't like that. And then you could check the data and see where did they stop playing, when did they keep playing, how are they, you know, are they buying the cosmetic things that you created, or are they not, right? And then you have a chance to like, and then you can even talk to them. I mean, that was a thing that I don't see a lot of mobile games do, and that I'd like to see more of, is that similar to those of us who worked with an MMO community, right? Like my audience, like I'd have conversations with them on a regular basis. Like, what did you like about the latest update? Or what would you like to see in the next one, right? Having that conversation. And this is one of the things that we want to do to make sure that, you know, we're building the right thing, especially without a giant bunch of data behind us, is that we build a little thing. We put it out there in front of some people and we say, how was that? Was that fun? Did you like it? Do you want more of this? You want more of that? Less of this, less of that, right? And then build the next bit of it and put it on there and be constantly iterating on that experience. And then that way you're building what your community specifically wants and what they're going to get excited about and what you hope they'll pay for, right? You know, and actually you can find out that way too, what they're willing to pay for, because you put some things out there and they'll be like, I'm not gonna, like, one of my favorite games that I've been playing like recently released fingernail polish as a cosmetic. And I was like, I'm not paying for fingernail polish. Are you kidding me? Right? Like, but give me another like tiara, I'm paying for it, right? Like
I need to know whatever this title is, where fingernail polish and tiaras are an option, because I may be in. Most of those, in my experience, are more very like Barbie-ish, and I draw the line Barbie. So you can't talk about like really exciting and effective mobile games without talking about Candy Crush, because like the average person, right? Like that's the ultimate mobile gaming Cinderella story.
Mm-hmm.
Game for his mom, next thing you know, bazillionaire, everybody in the whole wide world plays Candy Crush. So first of all, like, give some facts and do some truth telling in terms of like, how atypical is that? Like, that's one out of how many would be? And then also, like, what is the perfect storm that creates a Candy Crush?
Oh gosh. You know, that's a combination of really, I mean, one, it was polished game design. It's a really great puzzle. It set off, right, I mean, I can't remember if Bejeweled came out before Candy Crush. I think it was probably similar to the World of Warcraft story.
Yeah, Bejeweled was already out. Bejeweled had been out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's probably very similar to how Blizzard won the MMO race, right? Which is somebody comes out ahead of you, throws a couple of ideas out there, right? And then you look at that and you go, oh, let me take a bit of this and a bit of that, and then I'll polish it up, make it really amazingly beautiful, and then send it out there. Candy Crush was so adorable, right? And they took like, the Bejeweled thing was already really fun and addictive, right? But it wasn't necessarily, didn't have this little Candyland board for me to follow on, didn't have these cute little caricatures and stuff. And so they took that very solid gameplay, addictive gameplay, and they created this story around it. Quite literally, we want to be able to tell stories.
I love Bejeweled. I still play Bejeweled. I've never in my life played Candy Crush.
Really?
Oh, one time, not ever. I also did Portal, for what that's worth. So like, I am the one exception to the two like uber ubiquitous gaming.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. Carry on.
That's amazing. I mean, you might like it. I don't know. Maybe you're not big into Candyland. But it is one of those similar, right, things where you take that mechanic and you add on to it a really beautiful polish and a story, which I think is something that folks can miss, especially if they're trying to target a broader market. And if they're trying to go right into this, I have this conversation often when people are talking about, one, gender is a spectrum. I'm just gonna put that right here. But like there are people who fall towards the male end of the spectrum, tend to like more of the like, just give me the hard like numbers and math bits, and I love mathy dice, right? Like bits of gameplay, right? They want to see the like the mechanics of it, right? But on the other end of the spectrum, folks who tend towards what we traditionally think of as women gameplay styles is very story driven, right? So one of the things that Candy Crush did, and what a lot of the games that are being really successful with that area of the market are doing, is adding a story element to it, really setting where I am, why am I moving things around on a board. Okay, gems are pretty, but like, what am I, a dwarf in a mine or something? Oh, all of a sudden Vigil's more interesting to me, right? But in this Candy Crush, it was like, no, there's like sweet little candies, and you're smashing them for funsies, and then so this cute little character can walk down the lane, right? But that's enough to set you in a specific place and time that lets you escape the kids who are screaming at you to get dinner ready already. And just be like, I'm sorry, I'm playing with some candy right now. I'll see you later.
To your point, like those have spawned a whole bunch of others, right? So like I play the Gardenscapes game.
Yeah.
It's basically the same thing, except there's this whole story about him renovating a garden. I save up all of my point, and then I watch like for 20 minutes, like whatever is happening in the world of this garden. And my husband thinks I'm a circus freak, and I don't even care. So like, I think that that's, I think your point is really well made, that like engaging stories is a thing. But I do have to ask on the engaging story thing, especially as you came to the world of gaming from being a director, cutscenes. They had their moments, right? Like Final Fantasy, it was like, it almost got to like 60% cutscene, 40% game. They got real controversial. It's a like love-hate. Some people are like, I like that I'm basically watching a movie while also playing a game. Other people are like, cutscenes can go and absolutely bite my shiny middle ass. So I would be in the latter category. Even though I like the story, I don't need like some forced 5-minute thing about what is the actual, if no, and you may not, but like, what is the actual demographic data around cutscenes? Like, that seems, what you're saying, that would be more in the feminine camp than in the masculine. But like, is that true, or like, does everybody do now that they hate them?
No, but now I want to know that data. Now I want to call up some data friends of mine and be like, what is the data on cutscenes? How many of us just skip through them? I would say I don't know. It could go either way, right? Because I think some people do like playing some games that, I've downloaded a new, there was a new like MMO on the phone that got launched this past week that I was playing the other day, but it pretty much is just on autopilot for the most part. It like runs you from one place to another, and then it goes through these like cutscenes. Even Genshin Impact, I really like how pretty that is, but I feel like there's a lot of cutscenes being thrown at me. And I don't feel like in those cases I'm playing the game. But I think that's really one of those things you have to like feel out your audience for, on if it's a thing they enjoy or not. To me, like for our purposes and our design, one of the things we're really focusing in on is you telling your own story. That's a really hard thing to do with a cutscene, right? Because cutscenes are usually like a pre-built animated story bit. And so, right, I need to know, what does the player's character look like? What are they going to do, right? And it really limits your choice, unless I'm going to only give you like 3 options. But even then, I'm taking the chance and making 3 different cutscenes that maybe nobody ever chooses the third one, and I just wasted some cinematics money, which is some serious money if you're ever in budgets for games. versus like giving the player like a chance to live that out and experience it themselves. There's a game that I'm playing where I get to like customize the way my character looks, but they've kind of done these little mini cutscenes. They're almost like little like vignettes, almost like a moving comic book picture. But I got immediately frustrated with that game because the character that's in these mini vignettes is not the character I designed.
So I preach on that one. I have a big thing about I get immediately frustrated with games where the character you see does not change when you change armor, accessories, what have you. Like, no. And I mean like every game. 99 Nights is a beautiful game, but it does not matter what you have put on your character in 99 Nights. It always looks exactly the same, mostly because I'm sure the price tag of all of the cutscenes there, right? But it's really frustrating because you're like, that sword looks badass in the picture, and yet it does not change on the screen. And even things like Spyro, where because I have children, so I play things like that, right? But you know, there's so many, anytime a game is not responsive to the character choices that I've made, I think that increasingly that's an expectation.
Yeah.
That like there was a time, like there was a grace period because it was hard with the technology, and now the technology is so ubiquitous. Everybody's like, oh, I just accept. But if I change shoes, I change shoes. And like what's coming around changes my shoes as well. And it's what's embedded in any of those like little moments of like viewing and that sort of thing.
I think it's very much that idea of like when you are building for this medium, right? And when players are playing this medium, first of all, they're playing it, right? And the difference between play versus watching, right, is how much I'm affecting this. Is this story about me? Or is somebody else telling me a story about them, right? And so I think the more your game is intending to tell a story about somebody else, then cutscenes make sense. But the more you're trying to make that story about let the player tell their own story, the less, right? Because you want them to have that room.
Right. So if we're telling a story about Batman, cutscenes make sense. This is Batman.
Yeah.
But if we're telling, like, if we've told you to create your world and create yourself, then that cutscene then probably doesn't make as much sense. Does it?
Yeah.
I cannot believe this, but we are actually almost out of time. I could talk to you all day, every day about gaming and gaming stories, but you know that. This is why we work. So before I let you go, first of all, we have to say that the big title that we're working on is Romancing Jan. And the Romancing Jan is not just a mobile game. There's other things people can do. So talk a little bit about Romancing Jan.
Yeah, so I came up with Romancing Jan, I don't know, it must have been like 3 or 4 years ago now. When I was playing another card game called Marry Mr. Darcy. And I just loved that the game creators of that game, highly recommend this game, go out and play it. It's so fun. I loved that they had really gamified this like society behaviors and this like snippy little like backbiting stuff that would happen between these characters. And I watched some friends of mine playing it one time and they really got into the characters of it. But the thing that I ran into frustration with, and that I do with most Regency era Jane Austen kind of stories, is that they're still very gender norm based, right? Like I was like, why do I have to either be married off or become a spinster? Like, why can't I be the, inheritor of great wealth and fortune, and there's like 10 people hoping that I'll choose them, right? Like, why can't I play that and not have to change my gender, right, to do that?
Shack up with my friend's sister.
Yeah.
Be spinsters together.
Right, exactly. But like it felt very right. That world was very limiting, and for some people that's part of the like is thinking about what it's like to have challenges But I wanted to create a world where I got to play with the nuance and all the like society rules, but without them being gendered and racist. And so I created this idea of us playing like a role-playing game in person. It was like a 2-hour ball experience where people were trying to make matches and spread rumors about each other within a 2-hour like time frame. And I got to do it at this live action role-playing convention. I ran the first run of it, got a bunch of feedback on like what systems worked and what didn't. Was going to run it again, and then COVID hit. At the time of COVID, I had just started a board gaming restaurant / pub. And that unfortunately did not survive COVID. So I was trying to figure out what to do with myself while shut off from the world. And one of the things that I loved about my pub was that I got to connect with people every day, like physically. And it made me think about this game that I had made and how important it was for me to like connect physically. One of the great things about that era was this idea of letters coming to people in the mail and these wonderful, like interesting newspapers. And so I created a letter game with it that ran for about a year, in which people were sending letters back and forth. And in the midst of that, I ended up hiring a couple of amazing writers from various backgrounds that rewrote the entire history of the world to be more, inclusive and not colonized. And so some of our amazing writers that work with us now at Rainbow Unicorn Games built this world with me. And so we ran it that way. And then we actually got a chance to finally do the big ball experience that I'd always had in my head just back on April 30th. And so our hope is to have more experiences like that where players got to come in and they had like a little like paragraphic, description of who they were in the world. And they got a chance to come in and do some gossip and stuff with each other and find out things about happening in the world and just have a wonderful tea and ball and dinner, and get dressed up and have some fun in the world. And then now we're going to make it into a digital game too. So all kinds of places to kind of explore this romantic escapism, as it were.
I do love the way your brain works. I'm not gonna lie. So one last thing before I let you go, I always ask, how do you answer when somebody asks you how much you make?
I make $200,000 a year.
I love that. Because it is the Unicorn Games, we are transparent about salaries.
That's right.
And so I just, I do ask everybody, but also I always prefer some creative answer. So.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. I, for one, went through a situation with a former company that I worked for where I found out that I was being discriminated against via pay. And I found that out when all of a sudden I was in charge of people's pay and I could see it in black and white. And even when I presented it in black and white, I had it argued to me whether or not it was a thing that needed to be fixed. And so I think the only way we can fix this as a society is to just be open and honest about it, right? This isn't a matter of like, I don't think it's right to like get paid because you happen to be a better negotiator than another person. Like we should be paid for what we have to offer, right? And like that shouldn't be based on, and we can't get rid of discrimination if we're not honest about it. So yeah, to me, I'm honest, I'm upfront about it. I encourage other people to do the same.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much. We'll have links in the show notes to Rainbow Unicorn Games, to American Jan, so people can fall in love with the world that you've created.
You've been listening to Hey, I Want Your Job. For more information on how you can get your own awesome job, visit ONH Consulting at www.onhconsulting.com. We offer incredible resumes, no-nonsense career advice, and real-world tips for landing a job in today's market. Check us out on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Insta for more insider information. Soon, you'll be hearing us say, I'm Michelle Olivier, and hey, I want your job.